He learned of her betrayal in a way that was both mundane and devastating. She slid divorce papers across the oak table they'd once chosen together, silently confessing to 6 months spent with another man. But the collapse of his marriage was far from the end of his story. Adam Atkinson, the reserved grocery store manager who had set aside his dreams to prioritize family, stumbled upon a discovery that would transform his life in ways he never imagined. While his wife traded their steady life for a fleeting fantasy, Adam embraced the chance to reinvent himself. With unexpected wealth and a renewed sense of purpose, he built a life so extraordinary that even she couldn't have fathomed it. And then, Adam vanished. This remarkable journey became the subject of a celebrated film, earning accolades like Best Picture and recognition for its stunning visual effects. Before we delve into the twists and turns of this captivating tale, let me know where you're reading from in the comments below. And if you enjoy gripping stories like this, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. The kitchen was unusually still for a Saturday morning. The warm Alabama sunlight filtered through the lace curtains, scattering soft patterns on the table where Adam Atkinson now sat. This was the same sturdy oak table he and Megan had picked out together over 2 decades ago. It had borne witness to countless family dinners, heartfelt conversations late into the night, and even the occasional argument. But today, it felt like a cold, unyielding wall between them. Across from him, Megan sat with her hands resting on a manila envelope, her manicured nails drumming softly on its edge. Adam glanced at her, noticing how little she'd seemed to change in the 25 years they'd shared. Her light brown hair still shone, styled impeccably as though she had just left a salon. She wore a simple yet flattering outfit, her toned physique hinting at the jogging routine she'd taken up in recent years. Megan appeared calm and composed, but Adam caught the slight tension in her pressed lips. For Adam, the moment felt surreal. He had poured years into running the local grocery store, creating a comfortable life with Megan, and raising their twin daughters, Olivia and Grace, who were now thriving as students at Columbia University. Their life wasn't flashy, but it was solid, dependable. At least, that's what he believed. Adam, Megan said, breaking the silence. Her tone was calm but resolute, the kind someone uses when preparing to deliver difficult news. She nudged the envelope toward him. "What's this?" Adam asked quietly, his voice steady but tinged with unease as a sinking feeling began to take hold. "Divorce papers," she replied, her words measured yet emotionless. For a few seconds, Adam didn't move. The words hung in the air like a weight pressing down on him. He blinked, struggling to make sense of what she had just said. "Divorce?" he repeated, his voice no louder than a whisper. "Yes," Megan confirmed, her tone softening slightly, though she held her ground. "I've thought about this for a long time. It's not because of anything you've done. You've been a wonderful husband, Adam. An amazing father." Adam's eyes dropped to the envelope, its bold lettering, "Petition for Dissolution of Marriage," staring back at him. A flood of memories surged through his mind. Their high school days when they first met. The modest wedding they'd cherished. Nights spent soothing their daughters back to sleep. The everyday moments that had made up their life together. It didn't seem possible that all of it had led to this. He leaned back in his chair, his gaze darting between Megan and the envelope. "I don't get it," he said, his voice strained with emotion. "Why now? After everything? After all these years?" Megan let out a deep breath, her composed facade slipping momentarily. "It's not you, Adam. You haven't done anything wrong. You've been everything anyone could ask for. But I've found someone else." Her confession struck him like a punch to the gut. Adam's jaw tightened, and his fingers gripped the edge of the table without him realizing it. "Someone else," he echoed, disbelief thick in his voice. Megan held his gaze without wavering. "Yes," she said plainly. "His name's Daniel Grant. He's in real estate. We've been involved for the past 6 months. A heaviness settled in Adam's chest as the room around him seemed to shrink. Their entire life together, the house, the family photos lining the hallways, the dreams they'd quietly nurtured, fractured in his mind, like shattered glass scattering across the floor. "You're leaving me for him?" His voice, rough and strained, barely rose above a whisper. Megan hesitated for a heartbeat, the hardness in her eyes softening just slightly. "It's not that straightforward," she murmured. "Daniel's driven. He's passionate, always reaching for something more. I admire that about him. And she paused, choosing her words carefully. "I need to feel that spark again, Adam. I need to feel alive." Adam shook his head, struggling to wrap his mind around what she was saying. "I passed on promotions, for you. For Olivia and Grace. I stayed in this town because I thought that's what we wanted." "What you wanted? Was I wrong?" A long sigh escaped Megan as regret flickered in her eyes, mingling with the same quiet resolve. "It wasn't a mistake," she said softly. "You've been everything I could have asked for. Perfect, even. But sometimes, perfection just isn't enough." The silence that followed felt like a weight pressing down on his chest. Adam's eyes dropped to the envelope between them. Each word Megan had spoken carried its own weight, anchoring him to his chair. A bitter cocktail of betrayal, disbelief, and helplessness swirled inside him. When he finally spoke, his voice came out low, almost inaudible. "I don't know how to respond to this." "You don't have to," Megan replied gently. "The papers are simple. You'll keep the house, the cars, and whatever's in our accounts. I don't want anything. Just a fresh start." Adam lifted his eyes to meet hers, searching desperately for some hidden reason, something that might explain how their marriage had unraveled so quickly. But Megan's expression gave him nothing. Her mind was made up, her decision final. "Just sign them," she added quietly, though her tone left no room for negotiation. "Let's not drag this out." Adam sat there, still as stone, while the weight of the situation fully settled in. The life he'd poured his heart into, the sacrifices, the love, the unwavering commitment, it all felt like it was slipping through his fingers. And yet, when he looked into Megan's eyes, he found no anger, no cruelty. Just a calm determination to move forward without him. "I'll sign," he said at last, the resignation heavy in his voice. "But I need some time." Megan nodded, collecting her things as she rose from the chair. "Take whatever time you need." She walked out, leaving Adam alone at the table. His eyes lingered on the envelope as sunlight continued streaming through the curtains, stretching long shadows across the kitchen floor. For the first time in years, the house felt painfully empty. Adam first laid eyes on Megan during his junior year of high school. She was leaning against the bleachers at a Friday night football game, laughing with her friends, the stadium lights catching the golden strands of her hair. He couldn't look away. Megan had always been the kind of girl who turned heads, confident, full of energy, the type who seemed to light up any room she entered. What surprised Adam most was that she noticed him too, the quiet kid who preferred reading about supply chains and market forecasts to tossing a football around. Their first date took place at a small diner just beyond the edge of their Alabama town. Megan spoke eagerly about her dreams of traveling the world, while Adam, ever grounded, shared his vision of building a steady, reliable future. Despite their differences, something between them just clicked. Megan brought adventure into Adam's otherwise predictable world, while he gave her the stability she hadn't realized she craved. By their senior year, the two were inseparable. Prom night ended with Adam awkwardly suggesting they think about their future together after graduation. Megan had laughed, nudging him playfully, telling him not to overthink things. "We've got time," she'd said. But even then, Adam could tell, deep down, she'd already made up her mind. She wanted a life with him. Marriage followed a few years later, and before long, their twin daughters, Olivia and Grace, came into the picture. Raising the girls became the heart of their life together. Adam took a job at the local grocery store, eventually working his way up to manager. The hours were long, but he always came home to a warm dinner and Megan's familiar, radiant smile. Their modest house in an Alabama suburb turned into a sanctuary, filled with laughter, school projects, and the chaotic clatter of piano keys as the girls practiced. Olivia and Grace grew up strong-willed and determined, eventually heading off to Columbia University. Adam and Megan cheered them on as they packed up their things and left, though once the house quieted, an unspoken heaviness settled between them. Adam often found himself reflecting on the choices that had led them here. There were opportunities, big ones, that had come knocking earlier in his career. Corporate jobs, store management positions in other states, and even the chance to start his own grocery chain. But every time, he let them pass. "It's not worth uprooting the girls," he'd tell Megan, certain that staying put and keeping the family together was the right move. He threw himself into his work, picking up extra shifts over the holidays and staying late when needed. But his dedication didn't stop at work. Adam was the dad who helped build science fair volcanoes at the last minute, who jogged alongside wobbly bikes until the girls could ride on their own, and who showed up to every parent-teacher meeting, no matter how busy things got. Adam took pride in being a reliable husband and father, convinced that his unwavering presence was the glue holding their family together. For Megan, though, Adam's steady devotion sometimes felt more like stillness. She appreciated his loyalty and the sacrifices he made, but deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that their life had stalled. The adventurous, ambitious future she once envisioned seemed to drift further away, replaced by routines and predictability. She never doubted Adam's love, for her or the girls. He was everything she thought a husband should be. Faithful. Respectful. A solid rock to lean on. But as the years slipped by, Megan felt herself shrinking in the shadow of his sacrifices. Her own dreams quietly faded into the background, almost forgotten. When Olivia and Grace left for college, the cracks in their relationship became harder to ignore. Without the shared purpose of parenting, the distance between them seemed to grow. Megan started jogging more, spending long hours outside the house, searching for something. She never spoke about it, but little by little, Megan began resenting the life they'd built. Not because it lacked comfort, but because it felt like the price tag on her dreams. Now, as she sat across from Adam, the clink of her spoon against her coffee mug echoed through the kitchen, filling the silence like a ticking clock. The divorce papers lay untouched on the table between them. Adam's hands were clasped tightly together, his gaze fixed on Megan. "The time's come," Adam said, his voice calmer than the storm brewing inside him. "I think you owe me an explanation." Megan's spoon stilled. Her eyes flickered toward the envelope before meeting his. "You're right," she said softly. "You deserve to hear the truth." Adam's chest tightened, and he braced himself for whatever was coming next. But nothing prepared him for what he heard. "I've been seeing someone," Megan admitted, the words slicing through the air like a blade. The room tilted, or maybe it was just Adam's head spinning. He blinked, struggling to find his breath as the weight of her confession settled on him like a lead blanket. "Seeing someone?" he repeated, as if saying it aloud might make it less real. "Yes," Megan said, her voice firmer now, as if speaking it plainly would somehow soften the blow. "His name's Daniel Grant. He's a real estate developer." Adam swallowed hard, forcing himself to speak. "And how long has this been happening?" His tone was low, taut, barely holding back the storm. Megan's hands folded tightly in her lap, her fingers twisting. 6 months, she confessed. "I didn't plan for it, Adam. I wasn't looking for anything, it just happened." Adam let out a short, bitter laugh, shaking his head. "It just happened. That's what you're going with?" Megan's shoulders stiffened at his tone, but she didn't look away. Her grip on the truth, no matter how painful, wouldn't loosen. "I know it sounds terrible, Adam. I'm not proud of it, Megan said quietly, her eyes flickering with guilt. But Daniel, he's different. He's driven. There's this energy about him, he makes me feel alive. Adam cut her off sharply, the edge in his voice unmistakable. That what you were going to say? Megan's expression tightened, but she nodded. Yes. I know it's unfair to you. But I can't keep ignoring what I feel. Adam leaned forward, his voice rising despite the ache in his chest. You can't ignore how you feel. What about me, Megan? What about the life we spent years building? Does that count for nothing? Her voice wavered as she responded, of course it does. You've been a wonderful husband, Adam. Truly. But I've changed. I can't pretend I haven't. Adam exhaled sharply, shaking his head. So, what now? You just ride off into the sunset with this Daniel guy and leave me with a pile of papers? Megan straightened, her shoulders squaring as if bracing herself. I'm moving in with him. He has a condo overlooking the river. It's what I want. Adam's eyes fixed on her, the woman he'd loved for over 2 decades. In that moment, she felt like a stranger. The room seemed to close in around him, the walls pressing tighter as her words dug deeper. Do you even hear yourself right now? Adam's voice trembled, anger and heartbreak fighting for control. You're throwing away 25 years, for what? A man you've known for half a year. It's not just about Daniel, Megan replied softly, but there was no hesitation in her tone. It's about me. About what I need. Adam's jaw tightened. And what about what I need? I gave up promotions, chances to move up, everything, because I thought we were in this together. Was I wrong about that? Megan's face softened, and for the first time, real guilt flickered in her eyes. No, Adam. You weren't wrong. You did everything right. That's the hardest part about this. Adam's laugh was bitter and humorless. Hard for you, huh? You're not the one blindsided. You've had 6 months to let this sink in. 6 months to plan your escape while I was here thinking we were fine. And now you expect me to just accept it? I'm not asking you to accept it, Megan said, her voice steady, though sadness crept in at the edges. I'm asking you to let me go. Adam shot to his feet, his chair scraping against the tile floor with a harsh screech. He ran his hands through his hair, pacing the room like a man searching for something, anything, to anchor himself. I can't believe this, he muttered under his breath. All these years, and this is how it ends. Megan rose too, wrapping her arms around herself like she was shielding from the weight of his words. It's not easy for me either, Adam, she whispered, her voice cracking. I hate that I'm hurting you. But staying in this marriage would hurt both of us even more. Adam stopped pacing, turning to face her, his eyes heavy with a mix of sorrow and disbelief. You know what hurts the most? His voice dropped, quieter now but just as raw. It's not even the cheating. It's that you didn't try. You didn't say a word, didn't give us a chance to fix this. Megan's gaze dropped to the floor, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes. I didn't know how, she admitted softly. And maybe, deep down, I didn't want to. Her voice broke. I'm sorry, Adam. The sincerity in her tone was unmistakable, but it barely dulled the sting. Adam held her gaze for a lingering moment, as if searching for something he'd somehow missed along the way. But there was nothing left to find. Without another word, he turned and walked out, the soft click of the door behind him echoing louder than anything else in the house. It was over. A marriage built on trust and love had unraveled, reduced to a stack of memories and signed papers. That night, Adam sat alone at the kitchen table, the divorce documents finally signed and sealed. The house was eerily quiet, but his thoughts roared louder than ever. Despite the storm raging inside, there was a strange, unfamiliar clarity in his chest. The life he'd known for 25 years was gone. But now, for the first time in a long while, the path ahead was his to choose. Adam found himself standing at a crossroads. He could cling to the pieces of the past or take those first shaky steps towards something new. The next morning, he was up before dawn, determined to put the past behind him in a way that felt real. His first task was simple, but it carried more weight than he expected: selling Megan's Subaru. She hadn't bothered to take it, choosing instead to drive off with Daniel in his sleek luxury sedan. Adam drove the Subaru to the dealership where they'd bought it years ago, back when things still felt solid between them. The car didn't fetch much, but that wasn't really the point. Watching the dealer slide the check across the counter felt like the first real sign that he was stepping forward, even if it was just a small one. Back home, the silence of Megan's absence pressed down on him. Half-empty closets, her toothbrush missing from the bathroom sink, it was like the house itself had been hollowed out. Adam decided to face it head-on. Room by room, he began the process of clearing out the remnants she'd left behind. Clothes she hadn't taken, the perfume bottles gathering dust, all of it went into bags and boxes. Some he set aside for donation, others he simply tossed. The hardest part came when he opened the drawer filled with wedding photos and anniversary keepsakes. Adam sat there for a long while, turning over each framed picture in his hands. In the end, he made a choice. The photos that featured Olivia and Grace, he kept those. But anything that centered on just him and Megan, he let go. As the days stretched on, the house began to feel less like a place they had shared and more like his own. That shift, subtle as it was, felt freeing. With clarity settling in, Adam called up Scott, an old friend who worked in real estate. Scott, always the optimist, didn't hesitate. "We'll get it priced right and sold quick," Scott assured him during a brief call. "Trust me, we'll make it attractive." Selling the house felt bittersweet, but Adam knew he couldn't stay. Too many ghosts lingered in the hallways. In the meantime, he tackled the less sentimental side of things: money and logistics. He opened fresh bank accounts, cancelled the credit cards with Megan's name attached, and cut ties with every shared bill. Even the phone company got a call. Megan's line was disconnected, and Adam made sure the account now had his name, and only his name, on it. Little by little, those small steps felt like stitches closing an open wound. A few weekends later, Adam held a yard sale, thinning out years of accumulated stuff that neither he nor the girls needed anymore. Neighbors drifted by, some offering quiet sympathy, others sticking to light conversation. Either way, by sunset, the driveway was empty, and the house felt lighter, almost like it was shedding the weight of old memories. Adam pocketed the cash and added it to his growing accounts. With the house on the market and his financial world in order, his thoughts turned to something he'd been putting off for far too long: a break. A 3-month vacation, maybe. Somewhere far from Alabama. A chance to clear his head, reflect, and figure out the road ahead. But before any of that could happen, Adam had to do the hardest thing of all. He sat alone in the living room one evening, his phone heavy in his hand. It wasn't the papers or the packing that weighed on him, it was breaking the news to Olivia and Grace. After a long moment, Adam dialed Olivia's number. "Hey, Dad," she answered, her voice warm and full of energy. "How's everything back home?" Adam hesitated, swallowing hard. "It's fine, sweetheart. But I wanted to talk to you and Grace about something important." The shift in her tone was immediate. "Is everything okay?" Adam exhaled slowly, steadying himself. "It's about your mom and me," he began carefully. "We've decided to separate." Silence. Adam could hear Olivia breathing on the other end, the quiet stretching longer than he expected. Finally, she spoke. "Separate? Like, divorce?" "Yes," Adam said softly. "It's mutual. We both agreed it's the right thing for us." "Does Grace know?" Olivia asked, her voice small. "Not yet. I was hoping you could help me talk to her." "Of course," she said, her voice gentler now. But Dad, are you okay? Adam smiled faintly, though she couldn't see it. I will be. This doesn't change how much we love you girls. Your mom and I we drifted apart. When Grace joined the call, the conversation followed much the same path, quiet concern, a few soft words, and more questions than Adam could answer in the moment. But by the end of it, Adam felt something shift. The hardest part was over. And somehow, even in the midst of it all, he found the faintest sense of peace. Both daughters took the news hard at first, but their support came swiftly. Are you sure you're okay, Dad? Grace's voice mirrored Olivia's earlier concern. I am, Adam reassured them, his tone firm but gentle. And I'm proud of both of you. That'll never change. Before hanging up, Olivia added softly, if you need anything at all, just call us, okay? We're here for you, Dad. Their words settled over Adam like a warm blanket, soothing the ache that lingered in his chest. Setting the phone down, he let out a slow breath, feeling something shift inside him. He hadn't just lost a marriage, he'd gained an opportunity to rediscover the parts of himself he'd forgotten. And knowing his daughters believed in him gave him the strength to take those first steps. The next morning, Adam found himself drawn to Hayes Ridge, a sprawling 2,000-acre stretch of dense forest and winding hills, managed by the local land trust. The air was crisp and cool as he trekked along the uneven path, the faint scent of pine lingering in the breeze. His metal detector hung over his shoulder, a GPS in his pocket, and for the first time in weeks, a calmness settled over him. Geocaching had always been his way of escaping, his personal reset button. Something about the search, the thrill of uncovering hidden relics, gave his mind a break from everything else. Today's goal was simple: find one of the oldest survey markers in the region, a stone rumored to be buried deep within the woods. Nearly an hour passed as Adam navigated through thick brush, sidestepping clusters of poison ivy and ducking under low branches. Then, just as his patience began to wear thin, the soft beep of the metal detector echoed in the stillness. Crouching down, he brushed away the layers of leaves and dirt until his hands hit something solid, a weathered brick monument half sunk into the earth. Embedded in the stone was a small bronze plaque, confirming it as the marker he'd been hunting. A grin tugged at his lips. He snapped a quick photo, satisfied with the find. But as he packed up to leave, the metal detector gave off another faint signal. Curious, Adam swept the area again. The beeping grew louder a few feet from the monument. Dropping to one knee, he began digging carefully, his fingers scraping against something rough and metallic beneath the soil. After several minutes, he unearthed a small iron box wrapped in canvas, the fabric still damp with oil. The box was heavier than he expected, the surface rusted but otherwise intact. Adam's pulse quickened as he turned it over in his hands. There was no mistaking it, this wasn't some lost camping gear or discarded tool. The craftsmanship was old, possibly even older than the marker itself. Later that evening, Adam set the box on his kitchen table, eyeing it with equal parts curiosity and caution. He considered calling the land trust to report it, but in the end, curiosity won out. Grabbing a pair of bolt cutters from the garage, he carefully snapped the lock and eased the lid open. Inside, nestled beneath worn cloth, lay 12 large coins, each gleaming as though untouched by time. Adam's breath hitched as he gently lifted them, the weight of the discovery settling in his palm. These weren't ordinary coins. The intricate details, the crisp engravings and polished edges, looked impossibly preserved. Adam turned them over one by one, stunned by the craftsmanship. He didn't know much about rare coins, but he remembered a book his grandfather once gave him, The Mysteries of the Penny. Digging through the hall closet, Adam eventually found it, the cover faded and corners frayed with age. Spreading the coins out before him, he flipped through the yellowed pages by lamplight, matching illustrations to the pieces on the table. Large cents. Minted between 1793 and 1857. The realization struck him like a hammer. These coins weren't just old, they were historical. Adam leaned closer, running his magnifying glass along the edges, marveling at how pristine they were. One coin in particular caught his attention, a 1793 chain cent, the first coin ever minted by the U.S. government. Its surface was flawless, as if it had never been circulated. His heart pounded as he continued his research, diving into online auctions and collector forums late into the night. Each new site confirmed the same thing: these coins were rare. Exceptionally rare. Some similar pieces had fetched prices in the tens of thousands, even crossing the $1 million mark. Adam sat back in his chair, staring at the small pile of treasure on the table. "This can't be real," he muttered, rubbing his eyes and double-checking the listings. But no matter how many times he looked, the truth remained the same. The coins were authentic. And their value was undeniable. As the weight of the discovery sank in, Adam felt something stir deep within him, a spark of excitement that had been missing for a long time. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, the numbness that followed the divorce began to fade. For the first time in months, Adam felt something stir, an excitement he hadn't known he'd been missing. This wasn't just a box of old coins. It was a doorway to something new, something he hadn't even realized he was ready for. Determined to protect what he'd found, Adam carefully stored the coins in a secure container, spending the next few days diving deep into research. He pored over articles on reputable dealers and auction houses, learning the ins and outs of the rare collectibles world. The quiet grocery store manager who had spent years focused on his family was now stepping into unfamiliar territory: high-stakes auctions, rare coins, and negotiations that could reshape his life. For the first time, his future didn't feel like a straight road leading nowhere. It felt open, expansive, limitless. A few weeks later, Adam found himself standing beneath the towering skyscrapers of New York City. The buildings stretched impossibly high, their glass reflecting the morning sun. The sleek, modern lobby of Adams and Burns was a far cry from the grocery aisles and quiet Alabama streets he was used to. Clutching his portfolio of photos and documentation, Adam took a breath, steadying his nerves as a polished receptionist led him through the building. "This way, Mr. Atkinson," she said, guiding him to a private office. Inside, David Adams, one of the firm's co-founders, rose to greet him with a firm handshake and a warm smile. "Mr. Atkinson, welcome to Adams and Burns. I hear you've brought us something extraordinary." "Thank you," Adam replied, lowering himself into the chair across from David's desk. He carefully laid out the high-resolution images of 4 coins from his collection, each labeled with detailed descriptions. David leaned in, examining the photos with a trained eye. At first, his expression was neutral, professional. But as he reached the 3rd image, Adam noticed his gaze shift, curiosity giving way to admiration. "These are remarkable," David said, his attention fixed on the pristine 1793 chain cent. "The condition alone makes them rare, but this is museum quality." Adam allowed himself a small smile. "I thought so too. That's why I'm here. I'm ready to sell these 4 coins, but I have one condition." David arched an eyebrow, intrigued. "And what might that be?" Adam slid a folded letter across the table. "I'd like Adams and Burns to purchase a piece of land in Alabama and donate it to the local land trust. The price is $600,000. The proceeds from this sale should more than cover it." David's expression didn't waver, but Adam could feel the shift in the air as he read over the letter. After a few moments of silence, David looked up. "That's an unusual request," he said carefully. "I know," Adam replied, leaning forward slightly. "But the land trust is doing something special. This would protect their work for years to come. You'll get the tax benefits, and I'll know that land is safe." David considered him for a long moment, tapping his fingers thoughtfully against the desk. "You drive a hard bargain, Mr. Atkinson," he said at last. "But I have to admit, it's a compelling pitch." Finally, he nodded. We'll proceed. On one condition, our appraisers need to verify the coins. They will, Adam replied confidently. As the two began to finalize the details, the office door opened, and a striking figure stepped inside. Charlotte Langley, the firm's co-owner, extended a hand toward Adam. Her presence was undeniable, poised, graceful, and sharp. Everything about her, from the way she carried herself to the subtle confidence in her voice, demanded attention. Mr. Atkinson, she greeted with a warm, polished smile. It's a pleasure to meet you. I've heard nothing but glowing things about your collection. Adam shook her hand, caught off guard by how at ease she made him feel. Thank you. I appreciate you taking the time. It's not every day something like this comes through our doors, Charlotte replied smoothly, her eyes briefly flicking toward the photos on David's desk. The next morning, Adam was surprised to find his phone ringing, Charlotte's name glowing on the screen. Mr. Atkinson, she began, her voice light and conversational. Would you have time for coffee before your flight back to Alabama? There's something I'd like to discuss. Curiosity piqued, Adam agreed. They met at a sleek cafe near Central Park, the city bustling just outside the windows. Charlotte wasted no time getting to the point. I think you're underestimating the value of your coins, she said, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. With assets like these, it might be worth considering an offshore account. It's the best way to manage the proceeds securely. Adam blinked, setting his cup down carefully. An offshore account? Isn't that complicated? Charlotte smiled knowingly. Not at all. It's more common than you'd think, especially when discretion is important. If you're interested, I could walk you through the process. I'm flying to the Caymans tomorrow for business. I'd be happy to arrange for you to join me. Adam hesitated, weighing the offer. This wasn't the world he was used to. But maybe that was exactly the point. I'll think about it, he said, his gaze meeting Charlotte's. Something told him this was only the beginning. The offer took Adam by surprise, but there was something about Charlotte's unwavering confidence that made it hard to say no. Before he could fully process it, he found himself settling into a plush first-class seat beside her, the hum of the engines beneath them as they took off for the Caymans. The trip blended business with a hint of something more. Charlotte's sharp wit and deep understanding of finance kept their meetings efficient and focused. But it was the in-between moments, the laughter over fresh seafood dinners, the easy conversation over tropical drinks, that made the experience unforgettable. As they swapped stories, Adam found himself drawn to Charlotte's world. Hers was filled with high-stakes deals, exotic destinations, and constant movement. His own life, by contrast, had been grounded in the familiar rhythms of family and community. Yet, as he recounted memories of raising Olivia and Grace or his years at the grocery store, Charlotte listened intently, as if those experiences held a weight she respected. One evening, they stood side by side on the balcony of her oceanfront condo, the waves below crashing softly against the shore. Charlotte turned to him, her gaze lingering. You know, Adam, you're different from the people I usually work with, she said thoughtfully. Most are chasing the next big deal, always looking over their shoulder. But you, she paused, her lips curving into a soft smile. You're grounded. Adam chuckled, swirling the ice in his glass. Grounded. That's a polite way of saying boring, isn't it? Charlotte shook her head, eyes sparkling. Not boring. Genuine. It's rare. And honestly, refreshing. For the first time in months, Adam felt something shift. It wasn't just about being admired, it was about being seen. Not as a man rebuilding after divorce or someone stumbling through unfamiliar territory, but as someone who still had value, despite the detours life had thrown at him. By the time they returned to New York, the offshore account was finalized, and so was something else, a quiet but undeniable connection between them. As Charlotte walked Adam to his cab, she slipped a small key into his palm. For my spare room, she said casually, flashing a warm smile. "In case you ever decide New York isn't such a bad idea." Adam stood there, watching her disappear into the busy streets, the key cool against his palm. He wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time, it felt like a canvas waiting for him to paint the first strokes. Back in Alabama, Adam sat at his kitchen table, sipping coffee as he reviewed the final transaction documents from Adams and Burns. The sale had gone through smoothly. The proceeds, more than he could have imagined, rested securely in his offshore account, a silent testament to how drastically life had shifted. For years, Adam's world had been shaped by careful budgets and predictable routines. Now, financial freedom was his, and with it came a quiet but growing sense of empowerment. The discovery of the coins hadn't just altered his bank account, it had ignited something he hadn't felt in years. Ambition. Late into the night, Adam found himself scrolling through online forums, diving deeper into the world of rare coin collecting. He connected with dealers, exchanged messages with collectors, and absorbed everything he could about maximizing the value of the coins he hadn't sold yet. His interest wasn't driven by greed, it was curiosity mixed with a hunger to learn. One discovery had led him down a path he hadn't known existed, and now he was eager to see where it might take him. With Scott's help, Adam sold his Alabama home for a fair price. The move wasn't about escape, it felt more like stepping towards something bigger. Piece by piece, his confidence grew alongside his plans. He began to dress differently, out with the worn flannels, in with tailored shirts and well-fitted slacks. The reflection staring back at him in the mirror no longer felt out of place in boardrooms or auction houses. Adam wasn't just a grocery store manager anymore. He was someone capable of navigating wealth, striking deals, and carving out a future on his terms. Neighbors began to notice the change. People who had once known him as predictable, steady Adam now stopped to chat, commenting on how different he seemed, more self-assured, more ambitious. Their words were kind, but Adam understood the transformation wasn't for them. It was for him. Charlotte's influence lingered, too. Even after he returned home, her confidence and unapologetic approach to life stayed with him. She had shown him the world through a different lens, not as someone broken, but as someone capable of rebuilding stronger than before. She never pushed him. Instead, Charlotte had a way of planting seeds and letting him decide when to let them grow. And grow they did. Why settle for what's comfortable when you're capable of so much more? Charlotte's question lingered, resurfacing every time Adam caught himself hesitating. It wasn't just something she said over dinner in New York, it had become a quiet refrain, nudging him forward whenever doubt tried to creep in. Adam began to notice subtle shifts in his mindset. He wasn't mirroring Charlotte's polished sophistication, but he was embracing the way she chased what mattered without apology. For the first time in years, Adam started setting personal goals that had nothing to do with raising kids or keeping a household running. He wanted to deepen his understanding of coin collecting, to take risks without fearing failure, and to rediscover parts of himself that had quietly slipped away during his marriage. During one late-night phone call, when Adam voiced uncertainty about his future, Charlotte's voice cut through the noise. "You're more resourceful than you give yourself credit for, Adam. Don't let anyone, not even you, convince you otherwise." That encouragement stayed with him. Emboldened, Adam finalized his plans to move to New York. He'd stay in Charlotte's spare room while getting his bearings, figuring out his next steps one at a time. The thought of uprooting his life was daunting, but it didn't feel reckless. It felt like progress. As he packed the last of his belongings, Adam caught his reflection in the hallway mirror. His posture was different, straighter, more self-assured. There was a quiet confidence in his expression, the kind he hadn't seen in years. This wasn't just about coins or financial freedom. It wasn't even about moving to New York. This was about becoming the person he'd always been capable of being. Meanwhile, the cracks in Daniel Grant's carefully curated world were beginning to show. At first, Megan barely noticed. Riverfront development, the company Daniel had poured his energy into, seemed like it was thriving. The sleek riverfront condo, the expensive car, and the constant stream of exclusive events painted the picture of success. But pictures can lie. Behind the scenes, Daniel's empire rested on shaky ground. The bold real estate ventures that once earned him praise were now marred by delays and mounting debts. Whenever Megan voiced concern, Daniel was quick to dismiss it. "It's just a cash flow hiccup," he'd say, flashing that easy smile. "These things happen. We're fine." At first, she believed him. But the cracks widened. Contractors pulled out of projects. Creditors called more frequently. Rumors of financial trouble began circulating through their social circle. Then, one morning, reality hit her like a slap. Daniel's belongings were packed, and a hastily scrawled note sat on the kitchen counter. "I need to step away for a bit. Don't worry, I'll figure this out." But he didn't. Daniel never came back. The apartment, leased in his name, was repossessed within weeks. Megan found herself stranded in a city she barely knew, with no financial cushion and fewer friends than she realized. Her parents, though sympathetic, could only offer distant advice. And Megan's pride wouldn't allow her to reach out to Olivia or Grace. The girls had already voiced their doubts about Daniel, and she wasn't ready to admit they'd been right. For the first time in years, Megan felt truly alone. The stability she once thought of as suffocating, the home Adam had provided, now felt like something she'd been foolish to abandon. It was a humid afternoon when Megan appeared at Adam's doorstep. Adam had just finished taping up the last of his moving boxes, ready to start this new chapter. When he opened the door to find her standing there, clutching her purse and looking lost in a way he'd never seen before, he froze. "Megan," he said, keeping his tone calm, though surprise flickered in his eyes. "This is unexpected." She shifted awkwardly, her grip tightening around the strap of her bag. "Can I come in?" After a brief pause, Adam stepped aside, silently gesturing her in. The house felt hollow, bare walls and stacked boxes lining the space like quiet reminders that this chapter was closing. Megan's eyes flickered around the room, taking it all in. "You're moving," she said softly, not quite phrasing it as a question. "Yeah," Adam replied. "New York." Megan turned back toward him, meeting his gaze with something fragile in her expression. For once, she didn't seem sure of herself. "Adam." She stopped, exhaling shakily. He waited, arms crossed, leaning casually against the wall. This wasn't the Megan he remembered, the woman who had walked away so confidently. This was someone else. Someone who had lost more than she expected. Adam didn't rush her. He wasn't sure what she'd come to say, but whatever it was, he had a feeling it was long overdue. Megan's eyes drifted around the nearly empty house, taking in the bare walls and stacked boxes. Her gaze lingered on the little changes, subtle signs that Adam was no longer the man she had left behind. "You're really leaving?" she asked quietly. Adam nodded, leaning casually against the doorframe. "Yeah. New York." She fidgeted with the strap of her purse, nodding absently. "I heard about the coins. You've done well for yourself." Adam raised an eyebrow, folding his arms. "Why are you here, Megan?" For a moment, she hesitated, but the sigh that followed felt heavy, like she had been carrying it for a while. I need help, Adam." And there it was, the word she had likely struggled to say. Adam didn't respond immediately. He just watched her, waiting. "Help with what?" Megan dropped her gaze. "Daniel's gone," she admitted, the shame in her voice unmistakable. "He left me with nothing. I don't know where else to turn." Adam studied her, the woman he had once shared a life with now standing in front of him like a shadow of her former self. She looked exhausted, worn down by choices that had spiraled beyond her control. A part of him felt for her, but another part, one that remembered long nights of sacrifice and years of being taken for granted, couldn't ignore the bitterness that lingered just beneath the surface. "I'm sorry to hear that," Adam said, his tone polite but distant. Megan's head lifted sharply, her eyes searching his face. "That's it?" she asked, disbelief flickering in her voice. "After everything we've been through, you're just going to brush me off?" Adam let out a slow breath, choosing his words carefully. "Megan, I spent years putting your needs first. I passed up promotions, stayed in this town, and poured everything I had into our life because I thought we were building something. But that wasn't enough for you." Her eyes glistened, and her voice cracked. "I know that now. I made a mistake, Adam. I see it." Adam shook his head gently. "This isn't about fairness or who's right and wrong. It's about moving forward. I found a new path, and I can't go backward." Megan opened her mouth as if to protest, but she stopped herself. After a long pause, she nodded faintly. "I understand," she said softly. She turned toward the door, and for a brief second, Adam felt a twinge of guilt. But deep down, he knew this was the right choice. He had spent too long living for everyone else. This time, he was choosing himself. The days leading up to Adam's move were a blur of activity. Scott had handled the house sale with his usual diligence, and the new owners were eager to take possession. The money sat comfortably in Adam's account, another step forward, another clean slate. Adam focused on clearing out the last pieces of his Alabama life. Boxes lined the walls, labeled and stacked neatly, ready for the movers. There was a strange satisfaction in the process, like shedding old skin, making room for something new. As he sorted through closets and drawers, Adam stumbled across an old photo album tucked away in the back of a cabinet. He flipped it open, greeted by snapshots of Olivia and Grace at every stage of their childhood, birthday parties, soccer games, piano recitals. The memories brought a smile to his face, but not regret. He had given his daughters stability, and now it was time to do the same for himself. A week before his departure, Olivia and Grace surprised him with an impromptu visit. The moment they stepped through the door, the house filled with their familiar warmth and chatter, cutting through the emptiness. "Dad, this is wild," Olivia said, scanning the boxes. "You're really doing it." Adam smiled. "I am." Grace wrapped her arms around him tightly. "We're proud of you," she said. "This can't have been easy." "It wasn't," Adam admitted, holding her close. "But it's time." They spent the day tying up loose ends, sorting through boxes, reminiscing over forgotten keepsakes, and taking one last walk through the neighborhood. As the sun dipped low in the sky, they settled on the front porch, sharing stories and laughter. "You've taught us something, Dad," Olivia said thoughtfully, watching the sunset. "You showed us how to move forward, even when it's hard. That's something we'll always remember." Adam nodded, his heart swelling with pride. Knowing his daughters respected his strength meant more to him than any financial success. Later that evening, Adam's phone buzzed. He glanced down to see Charlotte's name on the screen. Her voice, calm and confident as always, greeted him. "Hey, Adam. How's the packing coming along?" "Almost done," Adam replied, stepping into the kitchen as the last rays of daylight stretched across the room. "I had a feeling you'd be ready," Charlotte said, a hint of amusement in her tone. "Listen, when you get to New York, let me take you to dinner. I have a feeling you're going to like it here." Adam smiled. "I'd like that." As he hung up the phone, Adam stood at the kitchen window, staring out at the fading light. The life he was leaving behind felt distant, but the future ahead, uncertain and wide open, felt closer than ever. Charlotte's voice carried that familiar air of effortless certainty. "Adam, are you ready for the big move?" "Almost," Adam replied, glancing around at the few remaining boxes stacked by the door. "Just wrapping up a few things." "Good," she said. "The movers will drop everything at my place." The spare room's ready, and I expect you to make yourself at home. Adam chuckled softly. You make it sound easy. That's because it is easy, Charlotte teased, a playful note in her tone. You're starting fresh in the greatest city in the world. Trust me, what's not to love? Initially, Adam had hesitated to accept Charlotte's offer, unsure if stepping into her world was the right move. But now, anticipation had replaced uncertainty. Her invitation wasn't just practical, it was personal. It symbolized the bond they had quietly built, one that felt like it could grow into something more. As the movers loaded the last of his belongings, Adam lingered outside his Alabama home, the weight of the moment settling on his shoulders. This house held years of memories, some joyful, others painful, but as he stood there, it felt less like a goodbye and more like turning the final page of a book he had long since finished reading. By the time he boarded his flight to New York, Adam knew he wasn't just leaving behind a house. He was stepping away from the man he used to be. The city waiting for him wasn't just a destination. It was a promise, of possibility, growth, and maybe even something unexpected. When Adam stepped into the arrivals terminal, Charlotte was already there, leaning casually against a column. Her presence, as always, was steady and reassuring. Welcome to New York, she said with a grin. As they walked through the buzzing streets of Manhattan, Adam felt something he hadn't felt in years, a renewed sense of purpose. His story wasn't ending. It was just getting started. That evening, Adam stood on the balcony of Charlotte's apartment, a glass of wine in hand, as the glow of the city stretched endlessly before him. The skyline pulsed with life, a stark contrast to the quiet Alabama streets he had left behind. New York hummed with ambition and reinvention. And for the first time in years, Adam felt like he belonged to that rhythm. He thought back to the man he had been just months ago, stuck in routines, weighed down by the aftermath of his divorce. Megan's betrayal had once felt like an unbearable weight. Now, it seemed like a distant memory. Adam had reclaimed control in ways he never thought possible. The discovery of the coins, the bold decisions that followed, they had unlocked something in him. But it wasn't just the money or the move that mattered. The journey forced Adam to confront truths he had long buried. For years, his worth had been tied to his ability to provide for others, sacrificing, compromising, bending to keep his family afloat. But now, for the first time, he was learning to invest in himself. His days in New York were filled with new routines. Mornings spent exploring coin markets and rare auctions, afternoons wandering museums, and evenings on that very balcony, sharing laughter and conversation with Charlotte over dinner. Every day felt like another piece of the puzzle falling into place. Adam's transformation wasn't just external. It wasn't about the move or the wardrobe changes. It was about rediscovering his own potential, letting go of the limitations he had once accepted without question. He was no longer defined by the roles he had played in Alabama. Those experiences had shaped him, but they didn't own him. As the days slipped into weeks, Adam's bond with Charlotte deepened. What had begun as a professional connection evolved naturally, quiet dinners, late-night conversations, and stolen moments that neither of them felt the need to label. Charlotte challenged Adam in ways he hadn't experienced before. Her confidence pushed him to think bigger, but it was her quiet belief in him that made the difference. One evening, as they sat side by side on the balcony, Charlotte's gaze shifted toward him, thoughtful and curious. "Do you ever think about what's next?" she asked, swirling her glass lightly. Adam chuckled, watching the city lights dance across the skyline. "Every day. But for once, I'm not rushing to figure it all out. I'm enjoying the ride." Charlotte's smile widened. "Good. You deserve that." Adam knew he was treading carefully. The idea of stepping into something new, someone new, was still a little daunting. But with Charlotte, there was no pressure. She saw him as he was, not as the man who had been left behind. And that made all the difference. Professionally, Adam's move had opened doors he hadn't even known existed. His knack for rare coins and market research led to several lucrative deals, and he found himself wondering if this passion could grow into something more, a full-fledged business, perhaps. The city's endless network of collectors and auction houses made everything feel possible. As the weeks turned into months, Adam realized he wasn't just surviving, he was thriving. The man who had once doubted his own worth had found a new sense of purpose. Resilience, hard work, and the quiet encouragement from people like Charlotte and his daughters had reshaped him into someone stronger, more driven. For Adam, the future no longer felt like an empty slate. It was a canvas. And for the first time in years, he was ready to paint it, boldly, unapologetically, and with every color life had to offer.